this is Robert Brown again, Professor of Communications, and I am pleased to be coming to you live on tape, as we say in the US, and in the fourth of a series of talking points or notes that I'm going to give you. Today, the topic is corporate representation. This is not a term that we use in the US. We tend to talk about brand and image and reputation and logo and the corporate website. But it's an important concept as I've been looking at it and maybe making some global comparisons. And I've subtitled this the development of a multi-dimensional identity. Because in the end, that is what organizations want to do. That is what public relations helps with. And I would say up front that one key difference between public relations and advertising historically is that advertising tends to be focus on a single thing, on a brand, on a single message. It is not quite so capable of addressing complexity and chaos and crisis as public relations. Public relations really is multifaceted and multidimensional, and it's one of its strengths through its use of rhetoric, persuasion techniques, audience analysis, and poetics, in a sense, writing and speaking, is to address complex issues in the way that we're doing in a classroom. Brand is God. I heard this from an advertising executive about 30, 40 years ago. Brand is God, and that is how advertising and marketing look at a product, at an organization, at a corporation, at a service, and really in a way that's how public relations looks from a marketing point of view, looks at organizations, and so there's an identity complex. What is the identity, and how do we get to heaven? I'm going to give you a couple of personal theories, and I'll call one of them Reputation Theory A. That is, the way to represent an organization or corporation is in the manyness of it, in its multi-dimensions. See only one thing. The brand is God. Call that corporate monotheism. And that really works for large, famous, high-profile organizations. And you'll see some pictures of their logos. Sony, GE, Apple, IBM, Disney. God is good when the brand is positively viewed. I can't help responding from a public relations point of view that the God sometimes fails. And if we think of Exxon, the picture of the Valdez, the ship that went down on a bank in Alaska, in pristine waters, making a very famous environmental disaster in 1989, and creating havoc for many constituencies, including Exxon itself. BP, British Petroleum, or what the company began to rebrand itself as and represent itself as, is Beyond Petroleum, a picture of a solar picture with green around it. That, however, has changed forever, perhaps. 13 people died in the Gulf of Mexico, and their wellhead blew out. The oil wellhead blew out in last summer, and the U.S. government established a $20 billion fund, $20 billion with a B, fund to pay out to the fishermen and others who lost their livelihoods. $4 billion of that 20 has been paid out so far. So that god failed. Another god that failed, Martha Stewart. There's a picture of Martha Stewart. We'll show you a picture of Martha Stewart, international media celebrity and the chairperson of her own company, Martha Stewart Media. The god failed for her when she engaged in illegal actions that actually caused her to be indicted and convicted and sent to jail, sent to prison for a number of months. She has returned, as Exxon has returned, as BP has returned. That's another story. And in global terms, the United States of America has suffered, particularly since the period directly following the 9/11 attacks, suffered a decline in its reputation. How does it represent itself? How should it represent itself? As a friend, as military power, as economic power? This becomes an interesting story for another dimension of public communication, which is public diplomacy. How should a government, in Barcelona, or in the U.S., or in China, or in Britain, how should governments represent themselves? Because indeed, governments and corporations share something of organizational identity. They share the fact that they are perceived, and that perception changes with events. Representation theory A, so brand is God. Representation theory B, I'll call it corporate polytheism. We worship many gods, not just one. Corporate multidimensionality. And let's look at examples of that. We look at organizations, corporations, organizations that do public relations in terms of their many sub-functions: issues management, crisis management, marketing communication, graphic design, event management, corporate advertising, seminars, employee communication. There's so many sub-functions of public relations, and there's so many constituencies. The vice president of public relations, corporate public relations worldwide for a large U.S. bank, I believe it was for Chase, said that has a textbook in the 11th edition, and in it he has a kind of sun representing the bank, and these satellites of 25 balls around the center, and those represent the constituencies: investors, customers, vendors, on inside employees, government regulators, international speculators, competitors, and of course the media. And now it's all in its expanded in many dimensional forms. So this is now we're moving into the realities on the ground of what corporations are. They're multi-dimensional. They have multi-dimensional constituencies, and they do many things beyond the logo. Years and years ago, when I was a corporate manager at one of the large U.S. Multinational corporations called W.R. Grace, which may have had operations in Europe, and maybe it had operations here in Catalonia. Grace tried to rebrand itself, as it were, by doing what we called issues advertising. And that is, the CEO believed in heightening productivity. And at the time, this goes back 30 years, at the time the US growth in productivity, employee productivity, was slowing, if not declining. But Japan's was far ahead. Germany's was far ahead. And this is 25 years after the end of World War II. These economies were very, very strong. The Japanese automobile industry was producing, the Korean steel industry was coming on. And so W.R. Grace sought to represent itself as a fiscally conservative growth engine, as a financially aware organization that would cut costs and that would address this issue of low productivity and or lower rates of productivity. So the corporations sent advertising people over to Japan to film a baseball game, and they showed cute Japanese little boys eating hot dogs and watching a baseball game in Tokyo, the Tokyo Giants. But the voiceover was sort of ominous. The voiceover, that voice behind the that you heard when you watched this commercial, said, "We taught them, U.S. We taught Japan. We taught them how to play baseball. We taught them the game, and now they're beating us at their own game." And this went awry. This created a controversy, as if Grace was criticizing the Japanese. So perception there is the case, and this is a problematic question, a problematic matter for public relations, whether perception is reality. Sometimes it is in a sense. It's not always, but sometimes it is. In this case, it was really a matter that Grace's perception of these beautifully filmed commercials with these adorable Japanese children watching this gorgeous stadium, watching this baseball game, they thought it, and sending a message that America, you better get on your horse, you better get with it and get productive, because Japan and Germany and Korea, why they're coming up right behind you. They're not the size that you were, but they are more productive. Well, this has turned completely into a disaster. And it was perceived as if Grace were a racist, anti-Japanese organization, a company. This was not. This is not the intention at all, but that's how it turned out. One of the subfunctions of public relations to represent an organization is corporate advertising on television. Now we are ensconced in. We live online. So we think that the online representation of an organization is the way it's perceived. Increasingly, it is the way it's perceived. But there are other media as well. Indeed, this ad could have run on a website in the days before there was a web in 1980. Let's look at what I call multidimensional representation. Social media, BIDMC hospital. This is the way one of the world's most admired hospitals, the BIDMC, Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, located in Boston. If you're sick, if you are very ill, Boston is a good place to come to. Massachusetts General, Children's Hospital, BIDMC, wonderful Leahy Clinic for cancer, wonderful, wonderful places. There are four big industries, four important economic drivers of Massachusetts, our state, and New England, indeed, and one of them is healthcare. The CEO of BIDMC a man by the name of Paul Levy, became a major force in social media. And his blog was followed by more people in the hospital and healthcare industry than any other. And let me tell you, healthcare is a huge part of the American economy, and it's also a huge problem in the American economy because of healthcare costs. But this is social media, that is the blog specifically as a tool, was used as a way of representing BIDMC. And here's the disaster. Here's the contingent disaster that happened. I'm not making the point that crises always happen, but there's always the possibility of a crisis. If things aren't monitored, this particular CEO had been having an improper relationship with a female employee that people at the organization noticed and were upset about. And eventually it turned into a scandal and a disaster, and he was edged out. No more blog, nothing like that for him. To the extent that an individual like Martha Stewart or Paul Levy is identified perceptually with a organization, let us say Barack Obama, George Bush, Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, to the extent that an individual represents an organization, a nation, a state, a corporation, a public-private partnership, a football team, Barca or the Revolution in New England, there is a risk. Martha Stewart went to jail. Paul Levy was forced out by the board and was investigated by the Attorney General. Let's take a case in which this works out very well. We have here in Barcelona, you have there in Barcelona, I wish I were there now, and I soon will be in a few weeks. You have in Barcelona a Starbucks and a Dunkin' Donuts, maybe more than a couple of them. Howard Schultz is the face of Starbucks. His webcast, which I can send you, the webcast of the 40-year anniversary of a company that started with 3 stores and now has 17 to 20,000 stores. I talked about it in a previous video. He is the face of that organization, and the message is we care, we have a heart, and the implementation is we give health care benefits to our employees who work 17 hours or more, I believe it's that. And they also are, we don't call them employees, we call them partners, and they participate in profit sharing. That face of Howard Schultz is the face of Starbucks. Beyond the logo, we look to the leader and leadership as the representative of the organization. Very, very important in public relations. So remember back to what makes an effective speech. What was the most important, one of the dimensions of the pentad? It was the speaker and the speaker's credibility. In the Greeks called it the rhetor. The rhetor was the sender of the rhetorical message and the analyst of the audience. So where you have Martha Stewart, or you have Barack Obama, or you have Howard Schultz, you have that speaker and that speaker's credibility, which is not stable. Events change. In the last 3 months here, it's now I'm speaking to you April 18th, 2011. Since January, Barack Obama's popularity has sunk below 50%, from the mid-50s to the below 50%. That's important because it's very difficult for any president to get reelected with very low popularity numbers. But the good news possibly for him and the Democratic Party here is that things could change. Things do change. And in fact, one event, it could be a big event like what happened to Japan's nuclear facilities, which will continue for such a long time, that has changed opinions about the efficacy and the safety and the strategic advisability of the nuclear option. At least it's raised that question, and it's worried lots of people and changed public opinion, which after all is what is the heart of public relations and politics? It is really public opinion, is it not? The Boston Celtics, dear to my heart. I'm a Boston Celtics basketball fan. And indeed, I believe Gasol, the great player, is from Catalonia, who plays for the Lakers, our arch enemy. It's like, I hate to say the words Real Madrid, but that's how we feel about the Los Angeles Lakers in Boston. The Celtics, the face of the Celtics has been its basketball stars. Paul Pierce, for example, as in Barca, the face of the leading players. The star. But when the team wasn't winning, it developed community relations. It developed a very active community relations, public relations program to take basketball stars out into the community, because when people weren't coming to see a winning team, they were coming to see a team with a heart. At least that was the theory. How effective is place branding? I've heard this from my partner, Enrique. I heard you talk about place branding for Barca, for the football team. What kind of a representation of that is that of Barcelona? The good thing for Barcelona is that it seems that whenever destination cities are mentioned for travel in the U.S. and elsewhere, no doubt, Barcelona comes up in the top 3, top 5, if not the first, over and over again. Vienna, Barcelona, they come up, certainly with European destination. But how effective is it for Barcelona as a place to be branded by its football team? There are other very compelling things about it. Its industry and its productivity and its financial health is not as well known, but ought to be. Now we come up against one of the dimensions that alter the way in which we perceive images, the way we perceive reality, mediated reality. That theory, which has been around for several decades, says essentially in plain English that when we look at what we know is what we know through the media. The media gives us images of Princess Diana and Kate Middleton and Barcelona and Barack Obama and the United States and Starbucks and images of the way people live through programs and through drama and through advertisements. That we really don't have an on-the-ground, direct, experiential understanding or grasp of reality as in the age of intensified media. We are swimming in a media sea, and to that extent, our perceptions are that much distant from reality. And that has a great effect on the way organizations, the way corporations represent themselves and how they think about representing themselves. Should the CEO go and speak to a group of important constituents? To what extent, how should the corporation represent itself? How should public relations think about mediated reality? It uses mediated reality to create a story, a narrative, a frame for it. But it's also in the crosshairs as it were. It's also a target of those who are activists and who oppose it and who portray it in invidious, negative ways. The way big business is portrayed in the United States in film is almost always as evil, cunning, conniving, secretive, and greedy and heartless. That's good drama. I enjoy those. I enjoy watching those John Grisham movies about evil, murderous corporations. But having worked in a few, I didn't see examples of it right in front of me, and I'm not willing to be a conspiracy theorist about it. But it's important to recognize for public relations, of course, the way in which the media portrays the organization, and to respond in some way. That should shape the way, the strategy that organizations use, corporations use to frame themselves, to brand themselves, to represent themselves. It doesn't always work so perfectly. The portrayal, for example, a portrayal of the nuclear industry after 3 Mile Island nuclear near meltdown in 1979, I believe it was, in the summer of 1979, or March of 1979, I think it was, really altered and halted the production of nuclear facilities and the nuclear fuel option in the United States, if not worldwide. We don't live in a completely free market. We live in a mixed economy, and that itself has an effect. When I say we, I mean Western democracies, Western industrial democracies in the United States. You have to factor in my cultural biases and representations. Let me take a look for a moment at the banking industry. Citizens Bank, banking with a heart, community relations, broadcast TV advertising strategy. You walk into a Citizens Bank. Now, Citizens has been owned by a Scottish corporation. You walk in and there are smiles painted on the structure of the interior. The interior design is open. The customer walking through or in the bank can take a look and see bankers and others face to face, pretty much. That kind of transparency is what Citizens is indeed banking on, as opposed to the perceived image of banking as something secretive and nefarious and greedy, which certainly during the financial meltdown of 2008, 2007, 2008, such a disaster, that certainly was a case for Wall Street and for banks. So Citizens comes along and recognizes this and tries to reframes the banking industry, if not the banking industry itself, in open, transparent, glass terms, terms you can see through, see into their heart, and their advertising campaign goes along those lines as well. Corporate representation is a drama. I like to use dramaturgy theory when I speak of public relations and public diplomacy. Dramaturgy made very simple, in very simple terms, 3 words: life is theater. We present ourselves in a certain way, depending upon the situation, as professionals, dressed professionally, if dressed down just a little bit. We present ourselves to other people that way. Depending on the situation, we present ourselves in different lights, in different ways, in different situations, to different people. We are different to mother and father, and to brother and sister, and to wife and boyfriend and girlfriend than we are to professor and lawyer and government regulator. We are constantly faced with what we are. Marlon Brando said that the oldest profession on Earth is actually not what people joke that it is, but it is acting, and which he called lying for a living. As an actor friend of mine reminds me, lying for a living, a facetious way to look at it. A great actor. But what Irving Goffman said, and what other anthropologists and sociologists following this dramaturgical point of view say, is that it's not a matter of lying, it's a matter of performance, it's a matter of expression, communication, persuasion, it's a matter of listening, it's a matter of reacting, it's a matter of strategically reacting to a situation, the way an actor reacts to another actor or a particular scene. To understand public relations would be to understand that life is theater. The book that is well worth your reading, and I have not checked. I assume that it's translated into Catalan, it's certainly in English. You can read it in English. Is The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. The presentation of self in everyday life. What we learn in that book is that life is theater, and that the actor is faced with defending his or her face. Face, not in a literal sense, but a metaphorical sense, in the sense of reputation. And therefore the actor must avoid mistakes, gaffes, G-A-F-F-E, gaffes, mistakes that would make perceivers suspicious of the reputation or credibility of that actor. This is true for organizations. In representing themselves, corporations must avoid mistakes, and yet they can't completely avoid mistakes. They can't completely avoid crises. They can't completely avoid the black swans that happen. They have to respond to them. They don't have the luxury of a second cut, of a director saying, cut, let's take this again. Live theater is live, it's not on tape. But dramaturgical discipline, that is the art and craft of creating impressions which are consistent with one's desire, when an organization's desire to represent itself. That dramaturgical discipline is necessary. When it fails, there's a small problem or a large crisis. The face of the organization must be protected, defended, and promoted. The face of the organization must be protected, defended, and promoted. And that means the face of Catalonia, the face of Barcelona, the face of the US, the face of Starbucks, the face of Exxon, the face of Citizens Bank. This is a way of looking at corporate representation as a drama. So Starbucks is beyond coffee, and Dunkin' Donuts is America runs on Dunkin'. And I haven't seen the advertising campaign yet in Catalonia. And those two represent different cultures, different segments of the American middle class, from the lower middle segment, perhaps the working class segment of, in traditional sense in the U.S., at Dunkin' Donuts, to the middle and upper middle segment of middle class. America represents itself as a middle class country, that a middle class society society dominated by the middle class, which is increasingly questionable given the disparity in income, the growing disparity in income between the high earners and low earners. That's another story for an economics course. Corporation and nation. Coca-Cola. Is that not the United States? Have a Coke? Coke versus Pepsi, nation by nation. In certain places, we see just Pepsi. In certain places, we see just Coca-Cola. This becomes, by default, a representation of the U.S. You see baseball pitchers, young pitchers in the Dominican Republic, drinking Coca-Cola, going to a Coca-Cola machine. That corporate global branding is a way that corporations represent themselves. The case of there's a few more notes I want to give you here. The case of Charlotte Beers in representing the United States before and after the 9/11 attacks. From an advertising person's point of view, not a public relations person's point of view, the idea for Charlotte Beers, who was an advertising executive in the U.S., who was hired to be the chief of public diplomacy, her strategy was simply to tell the story of the United States to the world, country by country, so that the world would have a better view of the United States. Well, that didn't always really work. Because that broadcast, that telling of the story wasn't enough. We may believe that the story that we're telling about our organization or place is, of course, compelling, but it may not be, because perception dominates. And in that case, the United States reputation in places in the Middle East, for example, certainly was affected much more by events on the ground and by public opinion there, and by Al Jazeera, and by the Arab press and word of mouth than it was by an American advertising person in the position of a public diplomat telling America's story. Telling versus conversing. The new and I think you well know this because you're online, you have Facebook, you have Twitter, you know that the new paradigm, the new way of doing public relations is engagement and conversation. That is to be intimate enough to engage audiences, not to broadcast or tell them from the top down, but to go one to many, many to many, and to say, to listen with some humility, to be aware of multiplicity and diversity, to engage in a conversation. This is very different from the old model, which was broadcast and which Charlotte Beers came from. If you read, and quickly I'll just mention Clay Shirky, Here Comes Everybody, Dan Schawbel, Me 2.0, which is about self-dramatization and using the new media, social media, to get a career. And Brian Solis, S-O-L-I-S, PR 2.0, it's all about social networks now. It's not about broadcasting, it's about connecting, always connecting and networking. And we have a flattened communication and social network space. So it's possible now through social media for organizations to be listened to talk to people one by one by one, and much more than it has ever been. There's a lot more that we think about. There's probably not time for it in these notes, but I will just mention another way of representing an organization is through something called MSB, or multi-sensory branding. Let me just read a quote from an executive. "I remember my multi-sensory brand experience in Berlin like it was yesterday, even down to the concert that I listened to that helped me make my trip back across the pond not seem so long. As you read this post, let me share some of the music from that concert that can perhaps enhance your brand experience at this site today. So what he was talking about, what this executive was talking about, was that Berlin sounded wonderful. And what Howard Schultz talks about with Starbucks is that it needs to smell wonderful. He was unhappy with the burning smell of bagels. He was happy with the smell of coffee. I smell coffee being brewed, taste my banana nut bread, touch my laptop keypad, hear the blues music being played in the background, and see my words being composed. At the same time, all 5 of my senses are being incorporated into the afternoon's brand experience. This is a perfect example of a concept known as multisensory branding. This is from a theorist named R. Wisman. That is another way in which that happens. Let me give you finally, just let me finish these notes on corporate representation by offering a kind of literary look at corporate representation. In the spring, green leaf buds and romance. In the summer, triple-digit growth and comedy. In the fall, metrics fall, it's a tragedy. In the winter, the CEO's discontent and irony. Corporations go through seasons. They go through spring, and it's wonderful, everything looks lovely, and this promising. In the summer, there's an explosion of earnings and revenue growth. It's a comedy. In the fall, tragedy looms. There's a crisis. The leaves are falling. In the winter, the CEO comes, like Howard Schultz came back to Starbucks in the winter of 2008 and said, we have to do better. This is terrible. We have to do better. We're losing our brand. These honors come from Northrop Frye's examination of literature in the Anatomy of Criticism. Northrop Frye, F-R-Y-E. So whether the corporation, where is it going? The corporation can be saved. There's always the possibility of redemption as it represents itself. As Steve Jobs is credited with saving Apple from extinction. And now Apple is one of the great brands of the world. There's always the possibility of extinction. We have what Howard Schultz said in his webcast is that of the Dow Jones 30 corporations that represented the US stock market in 1930, it was, or 1929, only one, General Electric, only one is still around. The others are gone. So when corporations do have a life and death cycle. Finally, in the age of crisis and the call for sustainability, what will happen to the corporate mantra of the 20th century? What will happen to the corporate mantra of grow or die? We're faced with the reality of change and with the challenge of sustainability as we go forward. Those are my notes for corporate representation, and I look forward to seeing you in Barcelona.